Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jello, and thank you for having me again. So I'll begin my presentation now. It's on mindfulness for well-being and resilience. And I think some of you may find some of these slides familiar already. I was thinking of the best way to teach resilience or to actually help give you some skills to cultivate resilience. And really what comes up in the research a lot right now, which I feel we can find helpful as well, is mindfulness. So I hope to be able to also share some techniques that you can do while at home. And hopefully this allows you to take better care of yourself and at the same time build those other coping strategies and techniques that can help you get through the daily stresses of life, whether it's like in your personal or professional life. But just to check in, I guess, if you could type this in the chat box, what's your personal weather today? Like if you just take a moment to pause, check in with yourself. Um, what's the weather like inside? And if you can share with us, I would really appreciate that, just to get a feel of where everyone is. Like for me, I'm like in that state where it's semi-sunny, semi-cloudy. That's how it feels like right now. What about for you? How would you describe it? Okay. Sunny and bright. Okay. What about for the others? Okay. Super windy for Jello with a bit of sunshine. Sergine, sunny but foggy. Okay. Um, and it's okay, like wherever you are. It's really a helpful technique to just check in with yourself and notice. Okay. Cloudy but bright. All right. So for the others, you're probably still thinking of where you are, but this is one technique that we really like to use, not just with ourselves, but also with our clients sometimes, because imagine that quick pause can just help give you an awareness of where you are or how you're feeling, and it's not a mood or an emotion per se. It's more of a narrative or a meaning. Like, what does this weather mean to you? What do these words mean to you? And that could go so many ways. That's, I guess, a mindfulness technique that we often do, and we don't notice what it is, but that's mindfulness already when you think about it, right? And some of the objectives that we'll try to achieve for today is to understand basically how our thoughts and emotions can affect our well-being, thus our everyday functioning and our sense of goal achievement. um, we'd also like to understand how mindfulness can help us enhance a sense of emotional and behavioral awareness, just by being present with whatever we're experiencing. So, just regaining that sense of awareness that we tend to lose sight of when things become overwhelming. And then I'd like to teach you some mindfulness techniques for better self-care and self-regulation. And really the point is to allow you to gain that sense of equanimity or balance, so that whatever life throws your way, particularly during these times, you can get a sense of what your handles or your anchors are, see your experience clearly, and hopefully choose to respond more appropriately. Are any of you familiar with this image? Um, have you have you seen this in the news recently? This was very popular, I think, jogging your memory back 3 years back. Um, do you recall this image in the news by any chance? Um, okay, I don't see videos, but I can imagine some of you nodding or saying yes. This is a photo of the 13 Thai or the 12 Thai children and their coach who were stuck in a cave for, I think, 17 days. It was a long time. They were only found on the 10th day. and they had very little snacks to begin with. But imagine when the divers found them on that day, they were sitting down and they were meditating. They had survived for 10 days with only some snacks. And the meditation practice was taught to them by their coach, who was in his mid 20s then, but he came from a Buddhist monastery, and he was able to teach them these mindfulness skills to help them preserve their energy, to keep the conflict levels down. Imagine these are children. These are boys. Imagine like all the energy, all the fear, the anxiety that must have been coursing through them when they found themselves stuck in that cave. They were not fighting. They were able to get along. They were able to survive on what little they had for 10 days. And a lot of people were attributing this the length of I guess their resilience, their ability to withstand that trial because of their mindfulness practice. And really this heightens, or I guess raises the call to be more mindful, not just in times of crisis, but even in our day to day. I think that made us aware of how important and valuable some mindfulness techniques can be. Because even if, say, we do not find ourselves in that situation, often we will find ourselves in situations where we feel threatened already. Because, like, even in our day to days, we have this tendency really to get carried away by our overwhelming thoughts and emotions. It just happens. These things are, things we realize or we come across on a day to day basis because we're faced with so much stimulus, right? And we tend to get carried away, really. Some metaphors we like using for these, or at the same time we notice people using for getting carried away, would be drowning in their experiences. Parang natutulala na lang sa sobrang daming nangyayari. Sometimes people would say, I sort of lost myself because I just had to keep on doing, keep on doing, keep on doing. And someone experienced breakdowns or meltdowns. I got carried away. I snapped. Bigla na lang nagalit ako. Or parang I froze. I just couldn't do what I had to at that time. These experiences of getting carried away is something that we experience, really. And parang I'd like to ask you, and if you could share in the chat box as well, what about you? What would be your metaphor or description for getting carried away? Like, what happens to you when your thoughts and emotions, your thoughts and your worries get you carried away? How would you describe it? If you would like to share, I would appreciate that. You can send a direct message as well if you're hesitant for to share it with others. But just to give everyone else an idea, or just to share in this day-to-day experience. What is your metaphor for getting carried away? Okay, there's this one message here. It's like a meltdown. That's what they feel. Mind block from Miss Myra. It's like my brain is trying to block out all the overwhelming stuff. Yeah, sometimes that happens, no? Some of us would hyper focus on a particular task just to get it done, but then we tend to forget everything else. Jello says it's being sucked into a whirlpool, not being strong enough to fight the current. Yeah, autopilot for others. Um, okay, natutulala din. Yeah, surrender everything to the Lord. Yes, sometimes we have this tendency na din, di ba, na parang, okay, I'm doing what I can. I am surrendering everything. God, just help me do the best I can right now. There's that. There's that mental or intentional idea or thought, right? And sometimes I think for me, when I get carried away, like Miss Myra, in the sense I tend to block everything else as well and then focus on to things a bit at a time. But I will tend to forget whatever else, the other things that are going on around me. So sometimes it's helpful that hyper focusing, and at the same time, sometimes it keeps me from relating better with others because I'm so focused on the task. I tend to forget the people around me. And that happens from my colleagues and sometimes, even my family, the people I'm around with now. Um, when we go back to psychology, like a cognitive theory, and I'm sure you're familiar with the slide for some people, they say that a lot of our emotional problems or stresses can happen because we tend to become overwhelmed with our mind when it becomes carried away, or when we tend to hyper focus, or when we tend to just be in like fight or flight mode. Our mind gets carried away, it's scattered, or sometimes we tend to focus on the negatives. That's what ruminating is, that we're unable to deal with the day-to-day stresses of life. Or sometimes we tend to freeze it or not become aware of it. That's what happens. Now, sometimes you were dealt with so many problems, and because we're trying to deal, we're trying to cope to the best of our abilities, some of us would have a tendency to deny the importance of certain tasks, while some of us would tend to um, over empathize or exaggerate the importance of these things. But what really starts to happen then is, often our mind would start spiraling into negative thoughts. And this is what happens when we become carried away. It's one negative thought after the other. And then we try to accomplish our tasks, but then the negativity is there already. And sometimes you don't become aware of this until the end of the day or until we already snap at someone else. So parang it's a belated reaction. Oh, wow, I must have been stressed at that time. I'm normally not so impatient, or I'm normally a bit more, understanding, or I can explain others, or I can explain to others when they make mistakes. I don't just lash out at them or snap at them or get angry. um, we'd like to teach you some mindfulness because it's really this awareness that can emerge if we try to pay attention to certain things in a particular way, and we try to focus on the present, and we also try to be non-judgmental. We just notice things as objectively as they are. And really, I love this image of like a dad and his daughter. They're looking at this view with the mountains and the sun. The dad is thinking of other things, perhaps work, what his goals are, what his futures are, what he wants to succeed at. So instead of seeing, what's right in front of him, it's all these other things that he's present to. Whereas the daughter is very aware of what she's seeing. And this is what we'd like to invite with mindfulness. That childlike awareness or that beginner's mind, really, so that we can see clearly whatever is happening in our lives. And when we see it clearly, some of us would be more exploratory about what we're seeing versus being judgmental na mali yan, tama yan, or masama yan, or okay to, mabuti to. It instead of judging or evaluating, we're just seeing things, and with that child's mind, with that beginner's mind, we're like seeing, okay, bakit kaya? Ba't kaya ito yung nakikita ko? Or why, how come this is present for me? Instead of getting upset at yourself for getting angry, you're trying to understand, I wonder why I'm a bit more short-tempered now. And I'd like to invite you to this short mindfulness practice called sitting with the breath. And you can do this from, anywhere from 3 minutes, sometimes even a minute, to like 10 minutes, depending on how long you have. And this practice just allows you to focus on your breathing for a few moments. Just that, simply focusing on your breathing. And then if you find yourself getting carried away or your attention getting carried away to other things, simply tugging your attention back to your breathing. So if I could invite you to just, sit in your chair or on your bed or wherever you are, perhaps putting your feet flat on the ground or crossing them, whatever is more comfortable for you, and then trying to focus your gaze on the ground. or perhaps closing it if you're comfortable. And then checking in with your back, trying to see if your shoulders are aligned with your hips so that you're in a position that's both comfortable and at the same time alert. And then taking note of where you are seated and where you are in your room. Perhaps just being present to the thoughts that you're thinking, to the emotions that you're feeling, and the body sensations that you're experiencing. Also, perhaps taking note if you're more attuned to your thoughts or your feelings or your body sensations. Whatever you notice that is going on in your internal experience, simply accepting it for what it is. And perhaps not trying to control or change your experience in any way. And with the same level of attention, perhaps trying to focus now on your breathing. Simply trying to follow your breath and allowing your breath to breathe itself. You may find yourself being distracted by certain sounds or perhaps other things that are going on around you. And when this happens, it's okay. You can congratulate yourself for noticing that you've been distracted and perhaps simply tugging your attention back to your breathing. Noticing your breath as it flows into your body and as it flows out of your body. Perhaps noticing that your breath is light or heavy. Or perhaps you could describe it as either shallow or deep. Simply becoming attuned to your breathing. Or perhaps you notice where breathing is felt the most in your body. Perhaps you can feel it the most in your chest or your abdomen or even through your nose. Whatever you notice, simply taking a mental note and allowing your experience to be as it is. And for every time you get distracted by a thought, by a worry, by distractions, simply making a mental note of where your attention went and then bringing it back to your breathing. And now beginning to expand your awareness to the rest of your experience. Perhaps again becoming aware of where your body is, on your chair, on your bed, wherever you're seated. Again, becoming aware of where you're situated in your room and of the sounds, the sights, and the scents around you. And also now, making a mental note to bring the same level of awareness with you through the next few moments of your life. And when you're ready, beginning to open your eyes. Okay. So I hope you were able to follow that mindfulness practice. And if some of you found that difficult, or some of you, found yourself falling asleep, that's fine. Just becoming aware of that experience and what it was for you. And I'd like to ask, now that, having gone through that practice, what did you notice of your experience? And just share, just feel free to share in the chat box. Did your mind wander? Did you notice where your mind went off to? What were you more attuned to? Um, and I can't stay in this bit for long, given the time limit, or we only have a few more moments. Then I'd like to talk about more things. But I guess just becoming aware of what that was like for you, and also checking in with yourself. This mindfulness practice, how could it be helpful in your personal and professional life? And perhaps also, with the same level of inquiry, just trying to, look at it with a child's eye. What did I notice? What was that experience like for me? Just try to not be, judgmental or so evaluative. Just really focus on being curious with your experience. And this mindfulness practice, this inquiry, as we say, is what makes mindfulness particularly helpful in interventions, and also with ourselves when we check in. Because when we, switch from our usual mode of doing, getting things done, being productive, to simply being, and that is the mindfulness state, we become aware of certain things that we normally do not become aware of. I guess that's what I'd like you to take away from this. And this is helpful because it really allows us to put a pause on our mind if things are becoming too quick, or if we become carried away. And some key observations, really. In that mindfulness practice, or over time, we will begin to realize that our mind thinks as naturally, as organically as our heart beats. They go together. Our thoughts are there. We're always thinking of something and it wanders on its own. Even when you're doing tasks, if you're an autopilot, it really wanders on its own. Sometimes when you're getting your work done, you notice yourself thinking about what you want to eat, who you're going to see later, what movie you're going to watch later. That's how our mind works. It really has a tendency to float, right? And sometimes you have this ability to hyper focus on tasks. You also notice that your mind will work on its own as it focuses on that task. So we do not have as much control of it as we would like to think. So when you think about it, really, our mind has a mind of its own. Um, and if we become aware of the process and contents of our minds, this can really influence our emotional well-being. And right, you're asking how? How can that happen? And I bring you back to the benefits of mindfulness, which I showed you before. And really, when we become mindful, we become more aware of ourselves and our autopilot. We become aware of what matters to us, what is important to us, and what we tend to think of most often. So when we're mindful, we see what's almost always present for us. So it gives you this level of self-awareness. At the same time, that practice or that exercise of becoming distracted and bringing your attention back to your breathing, becoming distracted, bringing your attention back to your breathing, it doesn't matter how often you're distracted. It's really this practice of tugging your attention back or directing your attention to something that gives us the mental muscle to really exercise focus and resilience. Because whenever we become distracted, we can choose. to focus on certain things. And sometimes it's not just the breathing. Sometimes you can focus on your senses, on what you're seeing, what you're trying to work on the person in front of you, on the task at hand. We can exercise that. It's also focus, right? But when we try to do that to our breathing, it allows us to be more non-judgmental because it's just our breathing. And there's something, I guess, non-threatening about focusing on our breathing that can really help us practice. And the breathing is like a two-pound weight that we can start off with, right? And as we begin to increase our practice or practice more, it can become a 10-pound weight or even a heavier weight. And these are the stresses that we deal with. But first, we have to practice with the light weights. And we do that continuously. So we get better at it. So when it becomes something more overwhelming, mas kaya na natin. Because our stress response, again, as these slides should be very familiar to you, we have a built-in stress response system carved by evolution. This was our threat response system, and it's a survival mechanism that just kicks in. It is in the amygdala, and our prefrontal cortex is our thinking brain. This was developed later on, but the amygdala is basically where our emotions come from. So when we experience stresses, some of us experience that emotional hijacking or getting carried away. It's because the amygdala takes over. When we try to practice mindfulness, we are training our prefrontal cortex. And they've seen this in research that when we become stressed or overwhelmed, the amygdala is the one that lights up, becomes stimulated. When we try to be mindful, it can activate our prefrontal cortex. So get it to thinking. Instead of just responding emotionally, we can now think what we want to do. And at the same time, as we try to become mindful, another part of the brain that is responsible for empathy, being attuned to ourselves and to others, which is the insula, also strengthens. So we're not just more attuned to what we need, we also become attuned to others. We become more resilient that way. So when it comes to dangers and threats, yes, we become aware of that. But mindfulness allows us to pause and say, wait, this is not as dangerous as you think it is. Or it can also tell us, hala, this is very dangerous, be very aware. And the prefrontal cortex starts to kick in. And now that part, which is responsible for executive decision making, thinking, planning, that kicks in, and we're able to decide what we want to do. So instead of just responding to things as something dangerous, fighting or fleeing, we can pause. We can teach your brain to pause. So instead of being carried away, which your mind is taught to do, because it's automatic, right? And as we get older, we begin to learn these survival mechanisms. They call them coping mechanisms or defense strategies that happens. And this is our personality na din. We tend to respond to certain things a certain way already. With mindfulness, we become aware, hala, this is my default pala. What do I want to do with it? Right? But instead of becoming, scared or judgmental, we become more exploratory. So instead of just, responding to the stress and acting immediately, mindfulness allows us to focus on the presence, as I said. Where we place our awareness helps regulate how we respond to stress. Mindfulness can allow us to place our awareness on our breathing, what we're experiencing, and with that same level of attention, perhaps to what is happening around us. So in that sense, we become aware, okay, I am upset right now. Okay, I feel scared right now. Or I'm anxious that my boss will get mad at me. I wonder why. Baka this has been happening for a long time, right? So it really is, mindfulness is really a way for us to pause um, and notice what's happening to us. And this is one toolkit that I'd like to leave with you. And it's called paying attention to the breath, right? You can make it a mental note to go into a mindfulness exercise, just pause. Then you do a transition breath, And then you can center and rest your mind to your breath. And then just trying to bring your mind back to your breathing whenever it becomes distracted. Just that. That's just a simple exercise, or that's just a simple routine, right? Um, and another practice I would really love to teach, but I noticed I had run out of time, is called mindful parsing. It's basically, in that moment, when you do that pause, just trying to be aware of your thoughts, your emotions, your body sensations, and your emotion or your action or impulse, your tendency to react, or the behavior that you want to engage in, as well as your five senses, what you're seeing, hearing. And just that allows, these things, they call this the wheel of awareness. They're happening outside your experience. And we would like you to focus on the center, your breathing, because this is something that's always with you. And once you do that breathing step, you can now list down, hey, what's going on? What's going on in my experience? And we ask, people to do this, whether it's a pleasant or unpleasant experience, just becoming aware of this. And later you'll realize, right, as you write these down or as you parse them, we call it himay. Like hinihimay mo yung experience mo at a certain point, you become aware that there's a chain reaction really. That we experience all these things at the speed of light, sorry. And all of these are called micro moments. So the point is to become aware of these micro moments and notice, hey, why am I always reacting a certain way to these things? How come that's always my default? How come my default is to distrust people? Or how come my default is to just trust so easily that it gets me in trouble sometimes? That's what we'd like to be aware of, those micro moments really. And we would like to look at them not judgmentally, because we realize now that yes, a lot of our stresses are automatic. As Sir Edgardo was saying, right? It makes you wiser than your enemies when there's a sense of meditation or awareness. You become more mindful of your experience. And then when this happens, you're able to pause. Because mindfulness allows us to catch them. And how, right? In our day-to-day, thinking or experiencing, something happens, we react. That's normal. And then belatedly, we become aware of certain things that were happening to us. Mainitan kasi ulo ko. I didn't get enough sleep, or I woke up on the wrong side of bed. I had a fight with my wife. My boss got upset at me. But we have reacted already. Parang it's too late, right? So when our mind is full or when we're getting carried away, our tendency is really to react automatically to those micro moments. And we have 1,000,000,000 micro moments in our day-to-day life. Imagine ourselves getting carried away all of the time. And mindfulness is not really asking us to become aware of every micro moment. That's not the call. It's only to notice those key micro moments, to just pause really with ourselves, or to make it a habit to check in every so often. Na, hey, how am I right now? Kamusta ba ako ngayon? What's my weather today, right? And then checking in, noticing, okay, medyo irritable ako, or I think I'm a bit cloudy, I'm a bit down. I'm a bit sad right now. That allows you to decide, right, how you want to approach the rest of your day, instead of not checking in with yourself, just trying to deal with things. When we have that practice of checking in with ourselves, perhaps taking breaks from mindfulness, when something happens, we try to pause, become aware of what is present for us. And then, given that pause, we can take deliberate action and say, oh, okay, I am so distracted by so many thoughts in my head. Perhaps I could write down all my worries, and then I know what I can do better. Part of regaining control, really, when we get carried away, is stepping back and observing our experiences. And with more clarity in our experience, we can choose how to respond. And really, this is the call, or this is what we need to be a bit more resilient. becoming aware of what's going on, because now we know what's going on in us. And at the same time, we're more attuned to how others are experiencing. We can choose to work together, right? And I wasn't able to go through this exercise with you called parsing with curiosity, but it's that. It's becoming aware of the wheel of awareness and what's present to us really. Because when we become aware of these things, our thoughts, emotions, body sensations, we can really pause. And it's really a practice. So I'm saying it's a skill and we can learn it. It develops over time and it takes practice. But really, we can use mindfulness, that ability to just pause. If it's 5 minutes, shorter than exercise, really. Become aware of what we're experiencing. Try to be less judgmental about it. Just become more curious, and hopefully that allows us to unhook ourselves from getting carried away. And we can say, wait, I was getting carried away. Pause muna. I want to stay here in this moment. I want to choose what I'd like to be or how I'd like to be. Um, and that can help us really. So there, that's mindfulness. That's developing resilience really. And there's so much to learn, I think, with that technique. But yeah, thank you for giving me this time. I hope I can, leave you with a quote actually that Sharon Salzberg was saying. She says with mindfulness, it's really the best mobile device. It's the best gadget that we have, that we can take with us anywhere, and that we can use at any time, at any moment. We can just choose to zone out, pause, be aware of whatever we're going through, see whatever is present to us, and then decide what we want to do. So we can go back to whatever we're doing, whatever it is that has caused us to become carried away. And then we can choose, how do I want to cope with this? How do I want to deal with this? And perhaps, right, respond more deliberately. And that is it. I am sorry for taking up the 40 minutes. Um, thank you. Thank you for that. Do you have any questions at this stage?
Hi, Miss Joey. Thank you so much for your talk this morning. No? Before we talk to our panelists, I just want to share a few thoughts about what you shared. Mindfulness has been very helpful for me growing up. I started this mindfulness exercise when I was in high school or college, I think. No, and maybe I could just share one experience where it helped me grow as a person, and it's quite recently actually. You mentioned that mindfulness is about pausing, about being aware, about pinpointing the things that somehow bother you, right? Or make things unwell for you, diba? I remember that a few years back, uh, my parents, who I live with, called my attention and said, "Jalo, you seem to be very irritable lately. No,
Mm.
you seem to be so short-tempered lately. No, at home and with your tone, with your attitude." And of course I had to apologize, and I it made me reflect. So one day I paused, I tried to center myself, and I asked myself, why was I being irritable? Why was I being so short tempered? Tried to be aware of what was happening in my life at that very moment. And then I was able to pinpoint that I was being irritable because there was something going on in the office. This was a few years back before Joy-Nostalg. And when I asked myself, why was I not okay in the office? I was able to pinpoint that there was someone in the office who made me feel uncomfortable. And I asked myself why. So of course this person was uh he did not treat me well. He said many things that were hurtful to me. And so I brought this hurt, this anger to the house, diba? And so I asked myself, why was I having trouble with this person? Why couldn't I forgive him? And then it dawned on me because this person was not remorseful. Now, that was something I cannot control. Diba? A light bulb went on during my mindfulness exercise. I cannot control whether this person will be remorseful kung gusto ba niya magbago, I can't control that. But what can I control? I can control my feelings and how I approach a situation. And so I prayed that night and I said, Lord, give me strength to forgive this person even if hindi siya humihingi na patawad. So mindfulness somehow led me to know my own flaws. It learned me pinpoint what can I do in that situation, the things I can control and cannot control. Diba? And so in a way, mindfulness helped me realize my own flaws. It was something I prayed about, it was something I worked on personally. And true enough, when I learned to forgive the person, I learned to be more patient. And so I became more aware of how I conducted myself at home. No? And it changed a lot. I changed a lot. I changed a lot completely. And I used mindfulness in many more situations. No? If I feel unwell, uneasy, diba? I try to center myself. I try to pinpoint what's wrong, what's bothering me. What can I do? How can I control this? And if things don't go my way and things seem to be uncontrollable, of course, like what one of our colleagues who commented, surrender to the Lord. No. So of course, mindfulness, that's through the lens of Ignatian spirituality. Of course, galing Ateneo yan, diba? Finding God even in sucky moments. So mindfulness can be a good daily exercise to help you become a better person. And of course, it leads you deeper into prayer. And that's why what you said earlier, Miss Joey, really struck me. It brought that memory back from the past. I tried to bury it, it's a painful experience. No? But of course, mindfulness helped me make that painful experience something worthwhile for me, for my parents, and to how I treat people as well. So thank you, Miss Joey.
Yeah, I like, yeah, it's very helpful because when you develop mindfulness, you become aware of certain blocks or things you
Yeah,
normally deny, right?
correct.
Because you're trying not to judge, and you see those things. I'd like to respond to what Sir Edgardo mentioned here.
Hmm.
Mindfulness, as explained, is really knowing ourselves in every detail of it, but it runs counter to God's precepts. Because in Romans 8:6-8, for to set the mind on the flesh is death, but to set the mind on the spirit is life and peace. For the mind that is set on the flesh is hostile to God, for it does not submit to God's law. Indeed, it cannot. Those who are in the flesh cannot please God. I guess like from how I'm reading it right now, it doesn't seem to run counter to it, because really with mindfulness, we're not trying to fully know everything, right? Or to just become aware of what is going on in the flesh, as was described here, or with ourselves. It's more of self-awareness and a growing self-awareness, and we can never fully know that, but we can try to know how we can help ourselves better. And I believe mindfulness is also akin to praying sometimes. Like when you pray and you're more mindful of your prayer, I think it's also more heartfelt. um, when I notice myself praying and notice what I also tend to pray about more often, it helps me become aware of what I value. So I feel that yes, mindfulness and spirituality can go hand in hand, and faith can go hand in hand.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
that's how I see it. So, Miss Liza, you're about to speak before I started speaking.
Hi, Miss Lisa Tayag. Miss Lisa pala is the regulatory compliance head from the EMU. Hi, Miss Lisa.
Yes, hi, Jenna. Sorry.
It's okay. It's
No,
okay. Go ahead.
being the panelist, can I just share what I
Of course.
wanted?
Go ahead.
Okay. Um, I was about to say that being a mom dad, I think I have a lot of things going on in my mind. And as Jedo said as well, there are things that we really cannot control. And in my life, there are so many things that I cannot control. Um, seeing a pile of dirty dishes, yung mga pile of dirty clothes, unfolded clothes, they actually tick me off. And I do have small breakdowns every day. There's literally a time when I was crying while I was washing the dishes because I just felt so tired. I felt that I was so all alone. My kids weren't helping me with the house chores, and I had to think of the things that we need to eat, order groceries online, uh, the things that I need to do for my work, everything. Then I need to think about how I will pack all our things because we're relocating to Pampanga. I'm relocating my kids to Pampanga because um, there are things that I need to work on here in Manila. Uh, a lot of things. And you know, Miss Joey, at times, natutulala na lang po talaga ako. It's like, ano bang uunahin ko sa kanila? Maglalaba ba ako? Maghuhugas ba akong pinggan? Magluluto ba ako? Gagawin ko ba yung kailangan kong gawin muna? Uh, I think I really need to learn the exercise that you taught us. Kasi ako po yung person na even if I'm praying, my mind really wanders from one issue to another. So, yun lang po, parang I really need time to think about things, focus on things, and prioritize. Sabi ko nga, I have to choose my battles every second of my life. So, yeah, yun lang po. Sorry. Yun, I just wanted to share nga that I really need to learn how to be mindful and learn as well that I really don't have control over things. I only have control over how I will react and how I feel. Para naman hindi yun sa lahat ng bagay I get ticked off. Kasi it really affects my relationship with my kids. Kasi kapag nagagalit na ako, syempre sa kanila ko nabubunton and my relationship with them is really very strained now. I hope people do not wag maging ganon yung relationship nila with their kids. Learn from my mistakes. Huwag kayong matikop from every mga aspects ng mga buhay nyo na nakikita nyo na hindi maayos. Learn to be mindful. Learn to accept things as they are. But siguro, syempre, you just don't learn to accept things as they are kung wala ka lang control over them. But for the things that you have control over, try to improve and do things na sorry, I'm bubbling, pero yun lang po, Miss Joy.
It's okay. It's
Jenna,
okay.
sorry.
No, it's
Thank
really fine,
you.
Miss Lisa. We understand your point naman and what you're saying. So no worries po.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that then, because like what you were saying with Jello, no, just trying to become aware of what you can control and what you cannot control is a difficult process, really. But hopefully with mindfulness, or when you become, more self-aware, dun mo makikita what do I have control over? What can I not control? Or what can I choose to let go of? As what Jello was saying, I can't control what the other person thinks of me. Or I can't always clean everything, diba? Parang nalaman din natin may limitations tayo. And you can choose to work with what you have, or with what you want to work on at one point. Hindi naman kailangan lahat, right? So it's okay if it's not folded or if it's not washed, perhaps. Hindi naman forever nandun yon. I mean, just for now, right? Thank you, Miss Lisa. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Miss Lisa, for being candid and honest with us as well. No, I think it brings the conversation down to the very experience of working parents here who are listening now, diba? Ano ba ako? Empleyado ba ako? Parent ba ako? Diba? Ako na rin ba ang house help? Nag-double na ba ako dito? Diba? There's so many things, diba? And we can only do so much, no? And we have to accept that. We have to accept that, diba? And not be too hard on ourselves. No? So thank you, Miss Lisa.
Thank you.
And
I
also,
hope the transfer goes well. Your relocation.
Thank you, Miss.
we have here Miss Myra Vega. She is a project officer from the Joy-Nostalg Foundation. Hi, Myra. Good morning.
Hello, Sir Jello. Good morning po sa lahat. So, hi Miss Joey. Thank you very much po. Una sa lahat dun sa topic po niyo. It's very, yun nga, ang daming takeaways. And I think the sharing din of Sir Jello and Miss Liza, it's like solidified po talaga yung takeaways po ng lahat ng attendees po natin ngayon. So, siguro na my question should be, baka mag-stem rin po sa experience niyo, Ma'am Joey, with your clients. Kasi I'm thinking, is there a moment na, or a client na like, when you ask him or her to check in your personal weather or whatever, were there times na they just they say na, okay lang ako today, like it's sunny and whatever, but siguro by checking on his or her mannerisms, you see na parang hindi naman yata sunny or bright ito si ma'am or sir. Like, are there people na like pretending to be okay just because siguro in their mindset, they are thinking na dapat okay ako ngayon kasi ganito, I'm doing well in my job, in my family, but you know, parang they trying to cloud yung mga yung mga thoughts or feelings na bad just because yun nga, it's my precondition na I should be okay. So do you have any experiences on that, and how do you deal with it po, or do you make the person realize na you have to check again, parang ganun po? That's
Wow.
my
That's sort of like, it's a tough question then. But really, I think kasi with therapy, what we try to do when someone says this is what I'm feeling, we accept it. We take it as true because that's what they're going through right now. And hopefully kasi in the conversation or in the session, dun we hold the space for them so that they feel not judged, just accepted, na as we go with them in that experience, as we talk about their experiences, unti-unti nilang makikita yung mga hindi nila kayang makita dati. But first they have to feel safe. So that's what we try to do first. Na it's okay if that's what you want to tell me, then yun yung tatanggapin ko. I will try to be with you in that place. So tell me more about it. And as they talk about it, then perhaps doon nila makikita na, I'm not okay talaga. But we've already developed that relationship where they know na it's okay, whatever they are or whatever they tell us, it's okay, tatanggapin namin. And we'll just reflect back whatever whatever we're seeing as well. And sometimes it's okay na baka pwede din namin sabihin na, okay, you're saying you're okay, but you look so sad. I wonder why. But it's more exploratory instead of shooting them down and saying, sabi mo okay ka, pero bakit ganyan yung itsura mo? Parang the tone is judgmental, diba? Same with sessions, with therapy, and with mindfulness. We just try to be accepting and try to be a mirror to reflect their own experience. So kung hopefully with mindfulness, with that non-judgment, they're allowed, they can see na, okay, may kulang pa pala. Or I have everything I want, but I have every material desire I want, but I have a negative relationship with my parents, or I haven't talked to my sister in a long time. Baka yun yung mag-surface. Hopefully that's what happens. But we start where they are. I guess that's what I'd like to say. Thank you for that question, Miss Myra. I hope I answered your question.
yes po. Yeah, it's yun po. Thank you rin po for taking the time to answering my question po.
Thank you so much, Miss Myra. Thank you so much, Miss Joey. Thanks, everyone. Bye now.